rounder. And that said, that should send a signal to Romeo that he needs to stay at IU for at least another year, I would think. We'll see how that plays out. Move on over to West Lafayette. Purdue seems to be the only team in Indiana as far as teams that we talk about on a frequent basis in the Big Ten anyway, and that is they're doing the right things. Matthew Painter and his squad is at Nebraska. Obviously, Nebraska, a good team as well, but Purdue's certainly well on their way into the tournament without any problems. What are your thoughts, Purdue at Nebraska?
I think this is an upset alert for Purdue. Purdue has looked very, very average away from home. I mean, they struggled just to beat Indiana. They played horrendously in a loss to Maryland. This is a team that outside of Mackey Arena looks very, very below average, and I would say, considering the NCAA tournament is not a home-and-home situation, you look at teams that are potentially teams that I would not pick in my bracket. I think Purdue is starting to look like one of those teams that I think could be vulnerable to a first-round upset.
Well, that'd be interesting to see what happens there with that. That's for sure. Let's get on to this big story that everybody's been talking about all week long, and that is, or not all week long, but the last couple of days anyway, and that is the major shoe explosion at Chapel Hill this week. I tell you what, we want to make jokes about it, but I understand that this is their livelihood. This could, but Nike stock did fail after the Duke Star certainly 33 seconds, I believe it was, that before the infamous shoe implosion as Zion Williamson breaks his shoe and was out for the game, and it looks like he might even be out for a couple games. And, what I found kind of humorous is now they're starting to kind of let these endorsements kind of trickle into the NCAA because they know it's going to happen anyway. And I was watching the press conference with Coach K, and Coach K goes, well, that's what happens now. We're this is going to be the new world, the new NCAA, and it's just something that we've got to get used to. Really, Coach K, because you've been part of that whole shoe deal behind the scenes, wink, wink, and a nod for many, many years. Everybody knows that you're not fooling anybody. But, certainly that was a big audience. Obviously, Zion Williams is going to be one of the biggest stars to come into the NBA draft since LeBron James. And certainly he is one of the most sought-after players right now in any NBA team. So Nike certainly suffered a plunge. And I hear they lost some money, not enough. I mean, they lost about $1 billion, which in theory to Nike, that's absolutely nothing at all. And they and it had some big audience members there. Obviously, number 44, Barack Obama was there. And Barack Obama, I only got to see 33 seconds of Zion Williamson. So what are your thoughts? First of all, what are your thoughts about the endorsements that are coming, that are now becoming more public that we always knew were there? And what are our thoughts when we look at about a shoe company? Now you have other players that are going to Nike and saying, hey, I got some questions here. And then you see tweets from Puma. This would never happen in Puma country. And that was kind of a fun tweet banner between Nike and Puma. And Nike tweeted back to Puma, goes, yeah, there hasn't been anything in Puma country since Lion King. So what are your thoughts on all that? Obviously, we'd love to talk about it here in the media. This is a national show, obviously. So this gets a lot of national attention, and we're not going to be any different today. Let's give it some love today, shooting the Nike shoe explosion at Chapel Rock.
I don't get into shoe talk after that glued LeVar Ball shoe that came out a few years ago that was a total bust, so I don't get into that. What I will get into, though, is the fact that Duke still should have won this game. It was at Cameron Indoor. You supposedly have two other players in that freshman class that are going to go in the top 5 in the NBA draft. They should have had more than enough talent and the pull of the fans to be able to pull out the game. They should not have lost by double digits, even if it was North Carolina. I don't care. That should have been an easy win still for Duke in that ball game. And I think with that performance, they certainly look vulnerable when the NCAA tournament cuts. The question is, are they going to be able to handle that pressure I mean, they couldn't get the job done at home. Now I think it opens up a new can of worms as to when we get to the tournament, is the pressure going to get to them? And I think it could, based on this performance.
Well, let's talk about the top 10, if you will, the top 25. Obviously, Duke, Gonzaga, Virginia, Kentucky, number 5, Tennessee, which we'll get into their game here in just a moment. You got Nevada. Michigan has slipped all the way down to number 7. North Carolina, Houston at number 9, and rounding off at number 10 is Michigan State. Let's go ahead and talk about Michigan State. They've obviously got a game on hand as well. Where are we at with Michigan State? What are our thoughts? I know that's kind of up there in your neck of the woods as well. Michigan State and Michigan are both kind of teams that you cover in your world. What are people talking about the Sparties?
I think there's a lot of vulnerability, not just with Michigan State, but I think in all the top 10 at this point. And, I mean, when especially you look at bracketology and look at the teams that are on those lower lines right now, for instance, Tom, I mean, you could have Loyola Chicago as a 15 seed. That's a scary matchup. You could have a Bucknell even as a 16, which is a scary matchup for teams. I mean, considering the vulnerability we're seeing for some of these teams, especially away from home, like what we saw Tennessee getting blown out by Kentucky, Duke getting blown out by North Carolina, I think right now, if Duke falls flat on their face against Syracuse, I think that's more cause for concern in Duke country. So there just is not what I would say, other than maybe Kentucky, and that's still far-fetched considering their poor performance against LSU at Rupp Arena a couple weeks ago. I don't think there's really a team out there that you could say is a solid or a surefire favorite. And, of course, with the way the thing is, especially with all these powerful mid-majors out there that I think feel like they're getting no respect, even though some of them, like a Buffalo or a Wofford, could get into the 7 or the 9 line even, I think you're going to see yet another NCAA tournament where we're going to have massive upsets on the first weekend because the field is so tight. But add to that, like I said, there's no one clear team that looks like it has a sense of stability as we draw close to tournament time. And I think Michigan State's certainly one of those that, like Michigan, looks vulnerable.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. That's why I always do multiple brackets, if you will. And one of my brackets is always the bracket buster because you're right. You never know what's going to happen in that the first couple of rounds, and it's always a nail biter. But yeah, I think you're right. We're on track for another. So if I were to give advice, I would make sure that you do a bracket buster bracket so that you are still in the hunt and you're not one of those guys ripping up their brackets on Friday morning. Let's go ahead. Let's move around the top 25 games going on today. And the top 25, that is number 5, Tennessee Volunteers against the LSU Tigers at LSU. Actually, this is an interesting matchup for me. I honestly think that LSU plays stronger at home than Tennessee does on the road. Tennessee is a strong number 5, but LSU is a weak number 13.
Well, I think right now it's clear to me that Tennessee has to bounce back and win this ball game. Another lousy performance away from home I think, solidifies the fact that maybe they were overrated when they won all these games in a row, and it makes you look back at, can this team win away from Knoxville? And I think that's the big question when you get to the NCAA tournament is these teams, where it's a neutral court or a road record, can they win away from their home court? And I think that ultimately when we get to tournament time, that means something. And I think it's not just Tennessee that is going to be under the gun. I think you got a potential for Virginia against Louisville, potentially. Auburn plays Kentucky today. I mean, there are several teams that I think can prove their case and make themselves look a lot better if they could steal one on the road this afternoon.
Let's go on over, and this is what is a gut puncher for IU fans. We see Marquette ranked number 11, and IU beat Marquette single-handedly. I mean, just totally dominated them, and you can tell that they've taken two different forks in the road. But Marquette at Providence should have no problem today. But what are your thoughts?
Again, though, that was early season for Indiana, and that was at Assembly Hall. I'd say, again, that's some of these, I think these these home game victories, I think sometimes get overvalued just a little bit. Marquette, like you said, though, they've had their opportunities to get the job done. Couldn't get it done, for instance, against Kansas. Lost to St. John's earlier this year, IU. So there are still some chinks in the armor. In fact, actually, they got swept by St. John's this year. So you look at the scenarios right now. They still got a couple chances to improve themselves. Obviously, the Providence game against a team that is definitely not going to make the tournament, but it's a game I think at Dunkin' Donuts Center they got to find a way to win. And then coming up next week, you got another big test at Villanova, and then Creighton and Seton Hall, potential mobile teams, and then team I'd love to see make them run late to try to possibly find their way in. Patrick Ewing's Georgetown Hoyas are making a move late. I don't know if it's going to get them all the way into the tournament as an at-large, but that's a team now that's showing up at bracketology among the outlist that they're getting closer and closer to possibly getting there. So for Marquette, I think right now the 3 line is probably where they're going to end up unless they make a major surge here late or they have a big run in the Big East tournament. They also could lose a lot, though, with some of the teams on their schedule and the bad loss potential for some of these teams that could really hurt their seeding.
We're talking with Matthew Embury, WSBT up in South Bend, Notre Dame country, obviously the official flagship station for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and contributes to some NCAA basketball talk with us, also our official Indy Car contributor, and we'll get into a little bit of racing here in just a moment. But as we continue around the clock with today's games, we got number 3 Virginia against number 18 Louisville. I think we're really starting to see the effect of the lack of Rick Pitino at Louisville. Obviously, we know the big scandal he was involved in, and they ended up having to terminate Rick Pitino. How big of a factor is seeing Louisville at number 18, which is something that we're not used to? Still in the top 25, that's true, but we're certainly used to seeing Louisville much higher on the scale. And certainly Virginia is – well, Virginia's no team you want to meet anywhere, but they just seem to do very, very good on the road. And, Louisville just isn't connecting the dots. Again, they're number 18, so they're still in the top 25, but they're not what the Louisville that we've seen in the years past in the Rick Pitino era.
But the thing is, though, you look at Louisville's record. I mean, there really aren't, other than the Indiana game and a loss at Pitt, there really aren't any real bad losses on the list. I mean, you look at the records, and I think most of their losses are legitimate. But, the big marquee victory isn't quite there yet for them. You look down the road, obviously the Virginia game is a big chance for them. And then, obviously, they have actually 2 chances at Virginia this weekend, and then they go to Charlottesville on March the 9th to close out the regular season. So 2 big chances for them to possibly get in. Obviously, they should be in the tournament at this point around the 5 or 6 positions as far as the seed lines. But you look at Virginia right now, the Duke losses are glaring right now. Thankfully, those are the only losses they've suffered. But thing is, can they rely on this, burn-down tactic as a high seed? Obviously, it blew up in their face when they played UMBC last year. And if they get into a quality opponent from one of those lower lines again, I'm not saying it's going to be back-to-back years so they lose to a 16, but you can't trust them anymore as to say that this is a solid team until they prove otherwise. I mean, they have the talent in Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome, Jack Salt, et cetera, but can they put it all together when it gets to tournament time? And I think that's something that the UMBC loss, even though it's 11 months ago, it still glares in the face because the performance there just totally stands out compared to what we normally see from a team like UVA.
We move on down south, if you will, to the SEC. Big cat fight at the Rupp today. Two rival teams. Obviously, Kentucky ranked number 4 and should easily handle Auburn. But let's face it, this is a rival. This is a big cat fight indeed. On paper, it looks like, oh, yeah, okay, the Wildcats got the Tigers on this one. But I'm going to tell you one thing. This is one rival. When they meet, it really, you just throw the record books out the window and let's go do some battle. Cat fight at the Rep today. What are your thoughts, sir?
I think Auburn could be